Hello, this is Module 5, Video 9. In this video we're going to write our sequence action, the first of our concrete actions. So we're going to put actions or concrete actions in a separate folder here, separate namespace. And this video is about our sequence action. So create this and create the test fixture. Alright, so this is the API we need to implement. But first of all, what is a sequence action? A sequence action allows us to compose a set of actions such that they run in a sequence. So we'll have any number of child actions, and when we execute the sequence action, it will execute each of those child actions in the order that we give it during construction. So let's start with some tests around duration, or actually around the constructor. And for our duration property, we need to test the usual things. Okay, so there's a few tests to start with, implying a constructor that takes the child actions. So that should build, and we should be able to ensure that our tests fail here. And they are failing, so that's good. Okay, so let's write what we need to write here to satisfy those tests. Okay, so if you've been following on the previous videos, this will look very familiar to you, this code. All we're doing is adding up the durations of the child actions to get the duration for the sequence action, which makes perfect sense because they're run one after the other. Okay, so that's passing. Let's move on to execution. Okay, so a few more tests. These are going to look familiar to you again if you've been following along, so I'm not going to delve in too deeply here. So we're just going to make sure that we execute each child action. Make sure that we skip over any child actions that are shorter than the skip ahead, which we're passing in here. And also the same thing, except when the context is paused, we want to make sure that we skip ahead still. So let's try them, make sure we're failing. And we are. So the implementation. First of all, let's make sure the context is not null. And essentially all we need to do is loop over our children and execute them or skip them if we can. But we also, actually we probably also need another test around cancellation just to make sure if we cancel the execution context kind of midway through executing, then it doesn't execute the remaining actions. So I'll add a test for that. There we go. So when we execute the second action, we cancel the context, and consequently we expect that the third action is never called, never executed, but the first and second will be. Alright, so there's what I think the implementation should look like. We're just looping over the children and throwing if the cancellation token's been cancelled, and then we do the usual checking of the skip ahead in the context and skipping over the child if we can. Otherwise we execute the child. So let's try our tests. Got a failure here. Okay, so I've just looked into this a bit, and what's happening here is we've supplied the specification here for action 2's execute async, and we've got this do specification which will cancel the context, but we've not got a return here, so it's going to default to returning null, which is causing the null reference exception. So also specify a return here. That should fix the problem. Okay, so obviously what's happening here is when we await this, it's actually throwing, so we never even execute these verifications. So actually what we should maybe do as well is make sure that we're getting a task cancelled exception. And if we don't, then we would expect a failure here. So it's actually an operation cancelled exception, which surprises me. Well, not quite what I expected, but let's try changing it to operation cancelled. Okay, so that does pass. I may look into this a little bit more just to make sure this is doing what we expect it to do. But I'll do that offline. I'll do that as a, any changes resulting from that will be in a separate commit after this video. So that is it for our sequence action. Now we have the ability to compose actions into a sequence. So I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.